And joining us now, WMAL's very own Mark Levin. Of course, the Mark Levin Show heard here every day, Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 p.m. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Ameritopia. And also, Mark Levin, your Landmark Legal Foundation, actually, did you write an amicus brief in this Arizona citizenship registration decision that came down yesterday at the Supreme Court?
Hi, Larry. Hi, Congressman. Yeah, and not only that, we advised the Attorney General in Arizona in this case. And some of my dear friends are kind of dismissing it as a quasi-victory. It reminds me of the Obamacare case, where a number of my libertarian friends are saying that was a great victory because they didn't use the Commerce Clause, they used the tax provisions to uphold it. Here's the bottom line. When you're looking at this from a constitutional perspective, not your everyday litigation perspective, it is a serious problem. Some of the people, conservatives, saying it's not that big a deal, are saying, well, the court could have done, and then they make a list of all the things the left had wanted, and the court didn't do it. Here's the bottom line people need to understand. The Constitution gives the federal government the power to set the time, place, and manner of elections. The Constitution gives the states the power to determine the qualifications of the electors. Even when you look at the amendments to the Constitution, the 17th Amendment, the amendments that allow blacks to vote, women to vote, people as low as 18 to vote. How did those happen? You had to have amendments. The states had to ratify those amendments, 3/4 of them. A court couldn't just rule. Congress couldn't just do it. The states are involved in determining the qualifications for electors. So the federal government passes this hideous law in 1993, the motor voter law, which is fraught with opportunities for fraud. Arizona, which is loaded up with individuals who are not citizens, says, okay, you can use the federal form, but it doesn't require evidence of citizenship. All it says is you just have to swear that you're a citizen.
Yeah.
So you have these groups all over Arizona handing out these forms, Xeroxing them, handing them out, and during a 6-month period in Arizona, when this law was in effect, they found 20,000 people who had registered who weren't citizens. And so the law was working. A federal district court threw the case out when it was challenged by the left. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that it was an unconstitutional preemption by the state. Well, how can the state preempt the federal government when the federal government doesn't have authority in the first place? And it goes to the Supreme Court, and if it's such a nothing-burger decision, why did Thomas and Alito strenuously object? So here's the thing. Thomas said, look, what did Arizona do? It said you can use the state form, the federal form, but we require a driver's license or a birth certificate or a passport or something to demonstrate that you're a citizen. And there's nothing in the history of the 1993 motor voter law that says that somehow the statute would preempt a state from reinforcing the form. There's no preemption issue here. That's nonsense. And the fact that the left claims that this is a great victory, and some on the right are upset, and people have litigated these cases before, and they could have lost on 5 different points, is wholly beside the point. One other thing. What is the recourse for the state? It's being said they can go to this commission that's set up by Congress and ask for permission to enhance the form. So, you see, the constitutional issue has been surrendered. The state doesn't have that much power anymore. That's number one. Number two, there is nobody on the commission. They haven't appointed anybody.
Yeah.
So that's nonsense. And then finally, Scalia says, well, maybe they can bring a writ of mandamus. What is a writ of mandamus? That is a motion to a federal court trying to force the federal government to add citizenship as a requirement. So once again, state authority is diminished. I know my friends at National Review and other places say, what's the big deal? They don't get it. I get it. I deal with this stuff every single day.
Mark Levin is our guest, of course. Mark Levin Show here on WMAL every day, 6 to 9. And give me the bigger picture here, Mark Levin, between this decision yesterday and then you see the quote-unquote immigration reform bill making its way through the Senate. It almost seems like there's this move to water down the real meaning of American citizenship. Am I being a paranoid schizophrenic when I look at it that way?
No, not in the least. I mean, you would think the federal government requires, if you open a bank account, you really ought to read the little statement banks are required to put on the desk when you sit down with the bank teller, and it says, because of threats of terrorism, we're going to need to have your identification, background questions. You have to answer a list of questions. federal government, when you want to get on an airplane, they want your driver's license and 1,000 other things. We have all kinds of rules when it comes to going to a 7-Eleven and getting a six-pack and so forth and so on. So what's the big deal with the driver's license? The big deal is, obviously, some people want voter fraud, don't they? Because otherwise this is utterly nonsensical. Every single state that puts in place a requirement for a driver's license and so forth offers to pay for it. Now they offer to pay for it. They'll deliver it to your place, wherever it is, under a tree, in an apartment, in a house, whatever. And that's said to be like the 1950s Jim Crow laws. What?
Yeah. Hey, Mark, let me ask you, because, Mark, going back to the very beginning, the question or the worry always with the founders was suffrage. Who had the right to vote? And first they said, no, you got to be a landowner. They said, well, you know what? That's too limited. How about people that pay taxes? Yeah, that's fine. No, that's too limited. But again, I think that if you go back to the beginning, what made us great and what made us the most wonderful place in the world is the way we were formed and the way the founders put it together. I'm trying to understand. Listen, this is not me talking as a congressman. This is me talking as the average Joe, the American citizen out there. What is so objectionable about something that's so important to make it so minor that you can get to it that way? I mean, you said it. Listen, I can't get on an airplane. I can't get in the house. I can't get into any federal buildings or any other buildings. If I'm traveling in my district back home, I better show my ID, or I can't get in to see a lot of the people that have said to me, stop by and see me. Why is it so difficult to require people to have some type of an ID in order to vote, the most important right we have as a citizen?
It's time to push back, because everybody knows what's going on here. There's actually a political party and operatives who don't care what the Constitution says. It's time for conservatives to stop saying we have these victories when we have these losses. It's time to push back and say citizenship means something. You know, the government exists for the citizen, we the people. It doesn't exist for foreigners. It doesn't exist for foreigners who come in here illegally. It doesn't exist for people who want to vote that don't have a right to vote. But we have all these groups that have been created, and their mission is what? Their mission is to elect by hook or by crook their candidates. Some of us play by the rules and we uphold the Constitution, and some people despise the Constitution and find ways to evade it. If they're not going to respect the Constitution, they're not going to respect the whole voter registration process, and that's what we're talking about. Arizona didn't create all these big requirements for somebody to vote. Arizona said, wait a minute. All this federal form does is say, you have to swear you're a citizen. And we have these groups Xeroxing them and handing them out all over the place, and we know people are voting. Well, let me ask you this question. If Arizona can't require, for registration purposes, people to show a driver's license to vote, then when people show up to vote, what are the election officials supposed to do?
Yeah.
Just smile?
Hey, Mark, can you stick with us just for a quick minute over the break? We got to break for traffic real fast.
Yes, sir.
Our guest, Mark Levin. By the way, his dad has a book out called George Washington, The Crossing, and I have not gotten to read this book yet, but my friends on Facebook are raving about your dad's book, Mark Levin. You must be very proud.
I really am. Thanks a lot. You know, he's 88, and he's a World War II vet, and he's an author and an artist and so forth, and he just feels that whatever he can do to try and inspire people, given what's going on in this country, that's what he wanted to do.
Well, I want to ask you, here we got Congressman Kelly is fired up about this decision that came down from Arizona, from the Supreme Court yesterday. But talk about a tale of two senators. You got Marco Rubio over the weekend saying, we're legislators. If we're not here to legislate, then there's no reason for us to be here. I thought that they were there to, protect and defend the Constitution, not to legislate. But meanwhile, you've got Ted Cruz from Texas, and he's ready to introduce this voter ID amendment to the immigration reform bill. Is there any hope of Ted Cruz's way being the way that the Senate moves here?
I don't know, but I like the fight. We got to keep fighting this issue. I don't know how we expect to win if we give up in advance. And I notice Republicans do this all the time. We can't get X, so let's negotiate and cut a deal. The left, they only cut deals when they're pressing their agenda. Yeah, why don't we have something like the Citizenship Amendment, something really unique, like you have to be a citizen to vote, period. I have no problem with that.
Mark, you've had Marco Rubio on. You've interviewed him. What's happened here?
I had Marco Rubio on about 6 weeks ago. This man is committed to this thing called comprehensive immigration reform, which started out at 844 pages. Now it's 1,075 pages. I don't know. And what's upsetting about it is on every other issue, the guy is solid as a rock. And then on this issue, listen, I don't know what to say. Politically, substantively, constitutionally, it's just all wrong and it's all bad. And I have no. It's inexplicable to me, quite frankly.
You know what, Mark? I got to agree with you. One of the things I think, though, and the conversation I keep hearing is that we've got to get this done the right way, or we can't win elections going forward. Well, first of all, your dad. You were talking about your dad earlier. My dad was the same way. World War II guy, really understood his role. Well, this is for our generation. This is our time, and this is our challenge. And this is not an option. We've got to fight this thing every step of the way. We took an oath. It has nothing to do with our party affiliation. It has to do with the Constitution of the United States in America. And if we're not looking at this the right way, this is a really big piece of legislation that has to be done in small bites. We have to tear it apart. We have to look at it. We have to debate it. And I don't mean just have a conversation. I'm tired of hearing people say, we've got to have a conversation. We've got to have more than a conversation. You better have a serious debate, a knockdown, drag out, get it out of the open, and get it handled type debate. If not, we're doing a disservice to the people who elected us.
Here's quickly my small bite. Secure the border and represent the citizen. Then we'll figure out what to do with people who came here illegally. We get the tail before the dog here, and this is why 60% of the American people are fed up. And it's not just secure the border because of illegal immigrants who come into this country. It's secure the border for national security reasons, sovereignty reasons, and every other reason. And I love it when the whitest of white senators keep beating their chests as if they represent the Hispanic community. And Lindsey Graham he speaks for all the Hispanics out there. Was there an election among Hispanics? Did they elect Lindsey Graham? When did this happen?
All the Hispanics in South Carolina, which, Mark Levin, I got to ask you, since we're throwing around the Constitution so much in this conversation, let's move to the Fourth Amendment, shall we? This NSA story, it's so disheartening to see people that I respect, Dick Cheney, John Bolton, coming out and saying, no, this NSA thing, it's a vital program, and it absolutely doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment. Do I have a misunderstanding of the Fourth Amendment?
Why don't we just put the Fourth Amendment aside for a minute and look at the Constitution generally? The Bill of Rights was adopted by the first Congress after the Constitution was ratified because 3 states threatened not to ratify, and those are New York and Virginia and Massachusetts. And so they came up with these rights that later became the Bill of Rights, and they were only intended to underscore the limitations on government. Now, some of us backed the Bush FISA efforts because it involved a focused effort to intercept electronic and telephonic communications from terrorist hellholes or likely hellholes overseas to people in this country or vice versa. And you didn't have time to get a warrant, so you'd intercept the communication. Then you'd go to the court afterwards, you get an after-the-fact warrant, and they would approve it or disapprove it, mostly approve it. All of a sudden, I keep hearing, oh, you guys are hypocrites because this was done under Bush, and now it's what was done under Bush? This massive blanket thrown all over the country, collecting our phone numbers and all the rest of this? If it was done under Bush, it's the first time I've heard it, and if it was done under Bush, shame on him. Let me just tell you this. What you really have going on here is the nationalizing of private information that telephone companies and server companies have secured in private contracts with we the people. I keep hearing, we don't own these numbers. Great, but neither does the federal government. And they step in and they basically replicate or duplicate the private data information that these companies have. That's not the way law enforcement works. The way it works is you don't start with the white pages and say, hey, let me see who committed a crime.
Right.
What you do is you get some specific information and then you gather the data. So Fourth Amendment or no Fourth Amendment, this is ass backwards.
All right, Mark Levin, we got to leave it at that, but we will all be tuning in tonight at 6 p.m., of course, to hear the Mark Levin Show. Right, always great to have you here on your powerhouse affiliate, WMAL.
You guys are great. Thank you very much.